Hello and welcome to Take Me Home, the podcast offering a social democratic alternative for the politically homeless. My name is Sebastian.Moore.
And I'm hilary.salt.
And today we're going to be talking about the news, I suppose overnight or yesterday, about John Healey resigning as Defence Secretary.
And I want to talk about Palantir, the analytics AI company, US company.
The Bond villain, as I think of them.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Should we start off on mine?
Yes, okay.
Because I feel it's more sort of topical and perhaps not as meaty. So, John Healey resigned, citing a lack of defence spending is the issue. So there's the Defence Investment Plan, which would increase defence spending from 2.6% of GDP, which it is at the moment, to 2.68% of GDP by 2030.
By very, very little.
Very little, yeah. And John Healey's resigning. I thought his letter. Did you read his letter?
I did.
It's quite interesting. There was a line in it where he said that. Can you remember what he said about the safety of the UK?
I can't remember exactly the words, but yeah, he did suggest that was something for us to worry about.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting because it was quite with these resignation letters, they're often not as brazen as that, as talking about you are making the UK a potentially dangerous place. Which is interesting. Since then, Al Khan's has followed him. So Al Khan's was the Armed Forces Minister. He was elected MP in 2024 and rose very quickly to a ministerial position, which is quite unusual. It's something that's changed nowadays. In the past, it would be almost like a traditional probation period for new MPs.
Apprenticeship, almost.
Yeah, exactly. And I think new MPs, the old timers would say, well, you can't expect a ministerial position in your first term as an MP. But he rose very quickly, which in some ways is surprising because they have a massive pool of MPs to choose from. But on the flip side, there's a load of new MPs. And there's been, particularly in the last few elections, there's been a high turnover of MPs, more than previous years. He is somebody that's being talked about as potential future Labour leader.
Another one. The odds for Al Khan's and John Healey to become next Labour leader have been cut a little bit. Still not favourites, but certainly more than they were yesterday morning. And John Healey, I don't think is as likely as a Labour leader. I think people look at Al Khan's as having that leadership quality that perhaps John Healey doesn't have. But Healey was seen as quite a close ally of Starmer's. He was.
It's quite interesting. So I want to talk about two things, and I'd be keen to hear your thoughts on this. Firstly, the defence angle. So what's interesting is we went through a very long period, certainly when I was growing up in politics, where the defence budget was continuously cut in terms of GDP, percentage of GDP. And it was also used often, particularly from people on the left of politics, as an easy battering ram to kind of say, why are we spending all this money on defence when we could be spending it on the NHS, on education? What's changed principally is Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 was a key moment where a lot of people said, okay, actually we do need to invest in our armed forces.
Is it that, or is it Donald Trump saying that we all have to spend more on defence?
I think both things kind of coincide, but I think it's very much 2022 because what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine was the long-standing assumption that war in Europe was a thing of the past was suddenly over. And it was such a shock for a lot of the liberal commentariat. They thought, no, but surely Russia isn't going to invade. And suddenly we've got war in Europe again. And I think it woke everybody up. And obviously Trump, particularly in his first term as president, was complaining about the fact that nobody was meeting their 2% of GDP spending on defence target, which all NATO countries have signed up to. They've pledged to spend 2% of their GDP, which they don't. Do you know how many countries do spend how many NATO countries do
meet their target?
I don't know.
3, I believe. Just
Wow.
the UK, which spends 2.6. And I want to say Germany's now meeting the target, actually. I think that's a change in the last couple of years. So maybe 4. UK at 2.6%. And then the US at 3.1, something like that. But they're not the top. Who's the top military spender in
Is
the
it
NATO?
Israel? No.
No.
I don't know.
Poland.
Poland.
Yeah. So
Wow, I wouldn't have got there.
countries on, and I'm worried now that I'm giving very false information because I want to say countries, the Baltics are definitely spending 3%. So what did I see that suggests? I might be wrong on that because I think Latvia, Lithuania, these relatively newer NATO countries are spending a lot on defence because they see more of a threat from Russia.
That would make sense.
Yeah. Interestingly, then, this defence investment plan, just to kind of give you some context on John Healey's resignation and then Al Khan's, he was asking, so the Ministry of Defence was asking for £18 billion over the next 4 years. And the Treasury offered initially 12 billion and then they upped it to 13.5 billion, which he said wasn't enough to fund the things they want to be doing with the military. Our defence spending in gross terms, so the amount of money that countries spend on defence in pounds or in dollars, let's say, where do we rank?
As a total amount rather than as a percentage of GDP, you mean? I'd have thought quite far down. 10th?
6th.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
So pretty high. That doesn't tell you the whole story because the countries above us, I think India, Germany are above us, but the countries above them are just way higher.
Yeah.
So particularly US and China. US is spending nearly $1 trillion a year now on defence, which is
I'm quite proud of 6th, actually. I think that's quite a good result.
But this is the thing, a lot of the narrative and the feeling, it actually doesn't stack up with the numbers. So we do actually spend quite a lot on defence compared to Spain, which is spending like 1.3% of their GDP. We're spending double that in percentage terms. What's talking about the general consensus then about where politics has gone since, and I would say since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the other parties all sort of agree that we need to up defence spending.
Yeah.
So we've got the main 5 parties at the moment. The Lib Dems, Conservatives and Reform are all pledging 3%. Lib Dems and Conservatives by 2030, Reform actually in 6 years. So the Lib Dems have a more hardline defence policy than Reform, interestingly.
Surprise.
The Greens don't say a great deal on it, but they've not said we want to cut funding. They've just said we need to spend more money on, the fluffier things. They claim
They want it to be fairer, I'm guessing. They always want things to be fairer.
Yeah, it's got to be fairer. So there is a general consensus. And what's interesting is that John Healey and Al Khan's are basically saying that the Labour Party is not matching that agreement, that cross-party agreement that we need to be spending more on defence. Now, it's easy for somebody like John Healey, and ministers will always do this, to say, you're not giving us enough money, right? Everybody always wants a bit more money for their department. I think the question has to be, where does that money come from? What if you're spending defence, you're naturally going to be spending less money on something else that you could have been spending it on. So those conversations need to be had. I also think that we can't ignore the fact that this is playing out on the backdrop of Makefield by-election and the almost obvious Labour leadership election which is coming. And I don't think so much with John Healey that he'll be manoeuvring. I think there's potential, but I think Al Khan's particularly, I would put money on the fact that this is a politically inspired manoeuvre rather than one built on pragmatic principles. The odds for the Labour leadership election, which or the next Labour leader,
Okay.
which I suggested earlier. Do you know?
No.
So Burnham is out and out favourite by a mile.
Okay.
He's at like 1-3, 1-4.
Wow.
So he's just clear favourite because they're projecting that he'll win Makerfield. Second.
Not West Streeting, no.
No, my favourite, Ed Miliband.
Do you? Right, okay.
Then Angela Rayner, Ed Miliband's about 10-1, Angela Rayner about 14-1, Wes Streeting, and then Al Khan's. And Al Khan's, I think a lot of the media, you'll see this more and more, but they sort of push him to be potentially a dark horse figure that could contest the Labour leadership election. So it remains to be seen, but I would not be surprised at all if he puts his hat in the ring, particularly as the people above him that are trying to perhaps beat Burnham to the leadership, they're known quantities. So he can claim, look, you've got all of this exposure, all of this publicity, and you're still not able to get near Burnham. To get behind me, and I've got a chance to beat him. I think that's highly likely.
Where is he MP for?
Birmingham Selly Oak.
Okay.
What I would say about Al Khan's and the media, he reminds me, he's like a British Pete Buttigieg. Do you know Pete Buttigieg?
I don't think I do.
So
no.
he was mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and he threw his hat in the ring for the Democratic nomination for president.
Okay.
In 2020.
I thought he might be the USA left back.
No. And the media pushed him as like, oh, he's a really talented individual, potentially he could win it. And I just think that we have such a dearth of talent in politics that we look at people like Al Khan's and think, wow, very, very special, very talented. And realistically, why? What's he got? And I'm not attacking him and saying he's not got any ability. I just want to see some ability.
Yeah.
Just let me see something.
Yeah.
It's the same with, and you might disagree with this, but Kemi Badenoch recently, I keep hearing very sane people just say, been very impressed with Kemi Badenoch. I think she's really in with a shot here. And I'm like, okay, she said like one sensible thing, guys. Calm down. Right.
Yeah. I do know somebody who's worked quite a high level in the military complex, if you want to call it that, and he was very impressed with Khan's. So maybe.
But it's that classic thing of we're in vibe-based politics, right? And it's that classic thing of like he's a sort of broad-shouldered man.
Yeah.
He's greying hair as well, so he looks experienced. He's been there, done that. He's got armed forces experience. He was a Royal Marine for 20 years, I think. And so he's able to speak to people. He's able to lead.
We love a man in a uniform.
Doesn't mean that he'll be a good prime minister.
No.
And we have to, I think, as a country, we have to kind of come to the realisation that it is not. We're not going to succeed by taking one person out and putting another in and going, oh, let's run it back, as they say in the NBA. Rather than making any trades, you run it back, try it again.
Just being a bit more serious for a moment.
Oh, yes.
So I think there was a third.
That's what you bring to the podcast.
I think there was a third resignation, wasn't there? A permanent private secretary has resigned as well.
Yeah.
Patricia Nash is her name, I think. And I just wonder to what extent do those kind of resignations actually have a real impact on our military? Because obviously at the moment we're in dangerous times internationally, but given the riots, etc., we're also in kind of quite dangerous times internally as well. And I think Khan said something in his tweet along the lines of, we owe a duty to our military to give them the right kit and to back them up whatever they do. I think that latter is a bit of a dig at the kind of court cases against soldiers, the kind of historic court cases. And if he's saying that, do the people in the military, the senior people in the military then think, well, okay, so the minister thinks they're not giving us the right kits and they're not backing us up, Is it it therefore reasonable for me to send my troops out on the streets in the event of riots if the police lose control of the streets? So, is this really in kind of political crisis territory is the question I'm asking. Is it more, you're kind of taking it's all about the leadership approach. Am I being just a bit of a worrier to think, actually, is it much more serious than that?
I think we're due a political crisis. Not that we're short of them, but I think there will be one, a big one, and I don't think this is it. Okay. And I think we're in for... We will go through the motions for a while before, and there is relative, I would say relative stability. I think that perhaps you don't see from the news within the military, etc. We have a brilliant military by all accounts that a lot of countries are jealous of.
They had their pay award agreed last week, I noticed.
Is that right?
3.6%, in line with the recommendation of the Armed Forces Pay Review Body.
Interesting. And I don't think this is as serious as it might seem. I don't think this is the big political crisis.
Okay.
I think this is just the same sort of Punch and Judy politics that we've seen over the last few years. And maybe that's a bit unfair. I think John Healey and Al Khan's, they might have slightly more principled reasons for resigning. And, you know, if they've had those backroom conversations with Starmer and said, look, you know, this is not enough, and they think there's real reason why that's a problem for the military, then resigning is perhaps the right thing to do. But I think that we're in mid-June. There's going to be a new prime minister, I reckon, in a couple of months' time, and we'll go through the cycles again of, you know, announcing policies and announcing things, and I just think part of what we try and do is take a step back and say, well, let's not get so invested in who's going to be the next Labour leader. It's good fun, right? But I don't think it matters too much. I know a lot of people that are really worried, you know, it might be Miliband and they don't like that, or it might be Rayner and they don't like that. And I think realistically we have to be working towards a better platform, a better solution that's more long-term thinking rather than getting caught up in this short-term politics.
That sounds right to me. Yeah. So is that your item done?
Very much so, yeah. So you want to talk about Palantir?
Yeah. So they're one of the baddies, obviously. Oh, by the way, have you got any SpaceX shares?
No.
No, you didn't apply.
I don't have any shares in anything.
Their launch, their IPO was today. I think 1.8 trillion it's been valued at. So I think it makes Musk a trillionaire.
Is that right? So it's been floated.
Yes.
And so there's an initial purchase offering.
Correct.
I've learned stuff from you.
Yeah.
So Palantir, just...
Yes.
I think let's give them the benefit of the doubt. It sounds... I think they're painted as villains.
They are.
And it just... They have this image to me of like the James Bond lair.
Yeah.
You know, where they're sort of rubbing their hands in glee.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about them.
So there's definitely that theme, that vibe, as you might say, to them. I think, you know, on the kind of progressive left, there's a bit of a Palantir derangement syndrome going on where, you know, they are the worst of the worst in all of all the tech giants. I think Piers Corbyn leads a weekly demonstration against them outside their HQ.
That doesn't surprise me.
So there's definitely that going on. And, you know, the kind of things that are thrown at them are, well, you know, they acted for ICE, you know, the deportation.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Correct, thank you. In the US. They do work for the Israeli military. But, you know, these are all things that other people do as well. You know, Amazon does as well. And they don't get the same bad press. But, so there's definitely a bit of a derangement syndrome against them, which I'm trying not to be infected by.
Do you think that's because we don't use them on a consumer level in the way that we use Amazon? So if Amazon do work for the government, we sort of say, oh yeah, but they deliver me my parcels.
Possibly.
Whereas Palantir, it's like, we don't know much about them because we don't have a consumer
relationship with them.
Well, also they're big guys. So Peter Thiel is the guy who set them up and still owns a big chunk of them, I think.
And within the what do they call it? Anarcho capitalist sort of tech bro US scene. He's sort of the
big
main
mover.
figure. Yeah.
Yeah. And Alex, I've forgotten his name now, the CEO. So these guys are both, they have views on everything that, people might expect them to have on. But they make pronouncements about things like we should bring back the draft, we should bring back conscription.
Alex Karp.
Karp, thank you. Yes, yeah. Khan, I think I was thinking of after you confused me with Karp, Alex Karp, yeah. And things like, they've said things like, if you don't believe in competition, you're a loser. They've said things that are fairly anti-woman, I would say. So, they've not done themselves any favours, I don't think, in terms of why are they the big baddies. They never think to bite their lip or not to say something that comes into their heads. So I think to some extent they bring it upon themselves. But at the same time, I think we should accept that they do some good work. One of the things, I don't know if you know about the contracts they have in the UK, but they have a £330 million contract with the NHS, which is, I think it's called a federated data system. This is the idea of having one patient record. So at the moment, your GP has some records for you. If you've ever been to the hospital, they'll have some records for you, but nobody ever joins those up. And I don't know if you've ever been to a hospital outside your area. When I was in the north of Ireland last year, I had to go to a hospital because I fell over in the woods and I had a big gouge in my leg. And obviously they didn't even know who I was, because they don't have any records of me. So the idea is that they'll create this one record, and they claim, and the NHS has kind of been part of the parties who've said that, backed up this claim, that there's been 100,000 extra treatments because of the work they've already done on this one patient record system. So I don't want to be kind of Luddite about this. I think, if you can bring in technology to situations like that and improve services, then we should be all for that. That's really good. But I still have some kind of slight doubts, and we'll come on to those in a minute, because the reason I'm bringing it as a news item is because what's blown up recently is more of a debate and a row about a contract they had pitched for the Metropolitan Police in London. And this has been it's been slowly evolving. There's different things happen over time. So they were apparently awarded this contract, this £25 million contract, and it's to kind of streamline a lot of the backroom work that the police do. So things like, if somebody applies for an arms licence, they will do a lot of the background check that at the moment is done in a very manual way. So it's doing things like that. But, obviously the more they start providing that service, you expect the more that they will do. Now, they had originally pitched for that work and been awarded it by the Metropolitan Police. The Metropolitan Police is overseen by, effectively, Sadiq Khan, the London mayor. I think it's called MoCop, the organisation. It's the Commissioner of Police, Metropolitan Commissioner of Police. Some initials that they use, and Sadiq Khan has blocked that contract that had been awarded and now has been disawarded because of Sadiq Khan's intervention. Palantir then said that they were going to sue the office of the mayor for blocking the contract because they believe it was awarded legally. Sadiq Khan says the problem is that they didn't go through the right procurement process. And he's kind of riding two horses, I think, a bit on this one. So on one level, he's saying, listen, I can't intervene in a procurement because I just don't like the people. So, I'm intervening not because I don't like them, but because I think that they've gone through the wrong process in the tendering work that they've done. But at the same time, you can see he's kind of tipping to his supporters and saying, "Oh, we really don't like them." But do their values really line up with us and our public service ethos? So I think he's riding two horses a little bit with it. But the reason it's in the news again, so it's a bit of a drip feed. The reason it's in the news this week is because the Metropolitan Police have issued their report, which says that because this contract that they had lined up with Palantir is not going ahead, they will now not make the savings that they would have made through it. And those savings mean that they will now have to lose another 500 frontline jobs. Actually, they say between 500 and 700. I think that includes some more backroom jobs as well. Now, that's in the context of a Metropolitan Police which has the lowest number of officers per 1,000 people. It has the lowest number of that since 1981. So they're already struggling. And effectively what they're saying is that without this new contract, they will need to lose another 500 posts. So that's obviously quite big news, and that's why this is in the news at the moment. So obviously there's lots of sides to this. What side might you take? And I think it's a little bit tricky. I mean, I definitely think it's really important that you go through the right procurement process. But obviously there's a lot of politicking going on at the same time. So it's kind of hard to work your way through it, really. There is this is allegedly, I should say before I say this, that there's an allegation that there was an earlier contract that was, so only contracts over £500,000 need to go through this full procurement process. And Palantir had previously done a contract for Scotland Yard, which I think was something like £490,000, so it was just below. And I think there's some cynicism about whether actually that really should have gone through the process and it was just pitched just so that it didn't have to. So, I would share some of that cynicism about that, knowing how public service procurement exercises work. But the thing that Sadiq Khan, and I naturally I wouldn't line up with Sadiq Khan. It's unlikely for me to say, oh yes, I agree with Sadiq Khan. But I did just bring a quote of what he said, which I think is I think is spot on. So what he says is, these private companies give you a good deal or something for nothing for a short period of time. You can become reliant on it, or you've got rid of the staff that did that job before, or staff that could be trained up. Then, when it comes to procurement, A, there's only one company that can win the contract, but B, you've completely hollowed out the expertise to do that work in-house. These are my general concerns.
Sounds like it was written by Hilary.Salt.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I read that and I thought, wow.
Yeah, he's spot on.
I'm going to have to say I absolutely agree with him there. And I know we read Vassal State recently, didn't we, by Angus Hanton, and he makes these similar points that often the procurement process does give you something for free and then kind of ties you in.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's no way out.
Yeah. And I obviously understand that the potential upsides, and if you're in these positions, whether you're heading up the Met or you're in Sadiq Khan's position as London Mayor, you might be tempted because a company comes in, big multinational, and says, well, we can offer that, we can do that for you and it'll only cost you this. And you think, oh, that's cheaper than we could do it.
Yeah.
Right. Then you get tempted to offer them the contract. But nobody talks about the downsides.
Yeah.
And when we're dealing with going back to short-term politics and, just being sort of pragmatic in the short term, but not thinking about a bigger principle and bigger picture, it'd be easy for these companies to get a foothold and then up their prices or, asked to do more things, bid for contracts elsewhere. And suddenly we have, like Sadiq Khan says, institutions with where the expertise has been hollowed out and we are hostage to these private companies, and we have to say, well, yeah, we don't really have a choice because we can't do that. And part of the sort of there is no alternative, Thatcher and onwards thinking of where our politics has gone is that we don't even think that that's an option. A lot of what we talked about in your local election campaign about the social care in Trafford, it was, I remember when you pitched it to me, I was like, what, a council could do that? I suppose, why not? They're the council. Why not have a care home themselves?
Exactly.
So that they can compete, so that they're not being held hostage.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that kind of, in terms of this whole debate, I think Sadiq Khan's stance there, I think, is right. I do have a bigger, perhaps more woolly concern about Palantir. So they were one of the companies that was identified by Edward Snowden, in that stuff that he was doing about how much surveillance of ordinary citizens is going on. And they obviously do have a lot of contracts with US police forces and the government and CIA and all those kind of US military. UK military as well, actually. They have a contract with the Royal Navy. And the thing that kind of worries me about them is that it's never very clear when they're harvesting all this data to what extent they're cross-using that data for other contracts. So, for example, the work they've done for the NHS, that gives them access to a huge amount of data. Are they, when they're doing work for the Met Police, using any of that data that they've got for something else to underpin the service they're providing elsewhere? Now, data protection wouldn't allow them to do that, but I just have a real background worry that actually they will effectively start to own that data and start to use it. Things like facial recognition, that some police forces are using. So I do really worry about that. And I think our relationship with our public services, with the NHS, with the police, with our local councils, is built on trust and a kind of respect for, your privacy and your data. And it feels to me that this really potentially undermines it in ways that I don't think we really understand. So, I would want to, as well as make sure the procurement exercise is done correctly, be really digging into that contract and looking at exactly how safe is that data and are they not being allowed to use it elsewhere? Because that's the thing I worry more about, is that, I understand the stuff that they're doing for this police forces in America. They effectively own the data once they've got that data. And I really worry about that. I do think that allowing those kind of companies to take on these public sector contracts does mean that we undermine that relationship of trust we have with our public services. And that, to me, is the bigger worry about all this. And
a lot of this, you can't go back.
Exactly.
This is the real worry with any sort of authoritarian measures, particularly when it comes to technology. It's so hard to go back. This is why a lot of people were upset about digital ID and still are. I remember seeing something, I really don't know if this is just a concern or whether there was any merit to this, about the idea of Amazon giving or selling the data from Ring doorbells to the police in America, because that's an amazing wealth of data that you've got about where crime is happening.
Yeah.
If people are stealing parcels, somebody's door, and they're going through Amazon to check the footage to see if they've been robbed.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing that is, I think, potentially very scary.
Yeah.
And we have to have, even if we're going to accept that we're giving contracts to these big, very powerful companies, we at least need to know what's our red line and where are we going to put some resistance up.
Yeah. One of the things that Palantir said in its defence when, all this debate was going on about the Met contract is that we've done, all this work and we've helped to solve all these crimes. Excuse me. And we've identified 1,000 women in Bedfordshire whose partners are at risk of committing domestic violence. And I kind of thought, well, who's asked you to do that? You know, it's like a Minority Report kind of thing, isn't it? Where they're kind of trying to preempt who might commit a crime. And I understand they've done quite a lot of that in America, kind of racial profiling almost, which is really problematic. So, you know, I kind of think it just leaves me with a really strong worry that we are handing over a lot of data to an organisation that might think it's using it for good, but actually is using it in ways that mean that they know things about us that maybe we don't want them to know.
And in this fight, there may be allies that you did not expect. Sadiq Khan.
Indeed.
Strange bedfellows.
Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. So I can watch this space in terms of how it all pans out. But I think, you know, in general, I think it would be good for us when we're thinking politically to be thinking about these big organisations and how much we share data with them and how much we want them integrated into our public services, which I kind of think is not very much.
Very good.
Good.
Excellent.
So there's another news episode.
Yeah. And next week we'll have an episode with Professor Frank Furedi, which we recorded a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And he'll be talking about his new book, In Defence of Populism.
So look out for that.
Yeah, keep an eye out for that one.
And as always, please do recommend us to your friends, share the episode, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks for listening.